Hi everyone, Leanne here from Jada Blossom, and I have a sports themed card to share with you today. Hey, so I'm using Jada Blossom's Have a Ball Know Me stamp set and the Have a Ball Know Me outline dies, along with Jada Blossom's Gnome Dies Sport Add-ons 2, their Candy Bar Slider die. I'm using that rectangular piece from it, and Jada Blossom's Star Dies. And I'm using the Slam Dunk pad from Doodlebug. It's an oldie. Sorry, guys. And I have this adorable gnome that I put together on the assembly video for that. So check that out if you want to watch me do that. I'm using the P13 stamping pad skin tones as well. That can be bought over at the Jada Blossom store. So first I'm adding on a piece of American Crafts black cardstock cut at 1 1/8 inch. And then this strip is a 1-inch strip from that Slam Dunk pad from Doodlebug. And I will cut off the overhang with a pair of scissors. There we are. And that's the inside so far. I don't have the matching odds and ends for these pads because back then I didn't buy them. Although I kind of wish I had them, right? I'm not sure if they were available, to be honest, because this is going back a time. But anyways, I'm going to stamp a sentiment on the inside using my Misty and some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. There we are. And I'll stamp that on the inside. So same rules, you don't want to press too hard. If you want to stamp multiple times, that's probably the best bet for a perfect image. Okay, so that said best swishes. So sort of like, swish when you shoot a basketball. Now I'm going to stamp onto some with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink onto Papertrek white cardstock. That was the same as my card base, right? It's kind of what I always do. So hope your birthday is a slam dunk. So if you have a basketball lover in your family, that's a cute one. And then I'm going to use the outline die and my Anna Griffin Empress machine. This is my mini Empress, actually. And I'm going to cut that sentiment out. Now, keep in mind that VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink does take a little bit to dry. It can be smeared, so be careful. So I did go ahead and I cut out some stars using the Jada Blossom Star dies out of some yellow American Crafts cardstock. And I'm just going to be adding a couple to the inside just for fun. And, since I don't have any of those sports themed odds and ends, so I'm just going to add those 2 stars to the inside. So best swishes. And I'm going to cover up the sentiment with some Post-it tape just because I don't want it to smear on the inside of my card base. Okay, so now I'm going to be adding on some paper. So this is some American Crafts cardstock that's cut at 1/8 of an inch smaller than an A2 sized card base. That was a 4.25 by 11, scored at 5.5 inches, with Papertrek white cardstock. And I'm going to add some Bearly Art glue around the edge just to make sure that the edges stick down. And then I'm lining that up using my reverse tweezers. There, and now this is cut at, 4 inches by 5.25 inches now. So, there'll be a 1/8 inch border. And it just has an all over basketball print. Remember, you can use any sports themed paper that you can get your hands on. It doesn't have to be this. They always have sports themed stuff coming out. Okay, so there is that. So now I'm going to be adding on a strip of American Crafts black cardstock that is 1/8 of an inch wider than the Candy Bar Slider die, that top layer for it. There it is. And this is the piece that I cut out with that Candy Bar Slider. And I'm just going to have that in the center. Now, obviously, I'm going to lose the stitching on the top because I will be trimming off the overhang. But, it kind of looks neat, and it's another way to use a candy bar slider die. I tend to use a lot of my treat dies in my card designs. You know, they're not just for treats. You could use them for whatever you'd like. So there's that. So I did cut out this little star border that is also from Jada Blossom Star Dies. And I'm going to add that to the inside too. That's that same American Crafts cardstock in yellow. Now you'll notice that our gnome beard is cut out of American Crafts gray cardstock. And I did use white pigment ink from Close to My Heart to ink around the edges. There. And also I used that, I don't know why, but I completely forgot that I used a different gnome on that. That'll be listed underneath my blog, or in my blog post, and underneath this video. I always list all of the Jada Blossom supplies that I use. So I'll make sure I have the correct one listed. I can't remember the name off the top of my head as I'm doing my voiceover. So I did cut out the outline die for my sentiment 4 times. Or it'll be 4 thick. And it just gives the sentiment a little bit more dimension and weight. So I'm just layering those up. That's another neat use for those outline dies, right? And then I do weight it down with an acrylic block until it dries. And you'll see that mustache has a different beard and a different mustache. Okay, so I'm gluing the little basketball on. You'll see that I did use P13 stamping pad skid tones that you can get over at the Jada Blossom blog under Fun Extras. And that different gnome beard and everything, that is from the Gnome Dies 2 set. I actually stopped the video to look it up because, you know, I have no memory these days, like 0. I know it's too much information. I think it's like a perimenopause thing. Like my brain is not what it used to be. So I'm going to look stuff up, boy. Okay, so I did cut these stars out of that same yellow cardstock. I'm trying to make a background with them. Stars are great to go with sports because, well, at least I think so. Because, you know, it's kind of like, you know, you're a star, you're a star, you know, on the court, that kind of stuff. And it's just a good background thing that you can do. So I'm just going to add on these stars to my background, just, you know, kind of a visual triangle and, you know, kind of weaving back and forth behind the gnome. Anything that gets your eye to move around a little bit kind of makes things a little bit more pleasing, or at least I think so. So I'm just going to add on these stars. Another thing I think that when you're making these more, I don't know, sporty or masculine cards, I call them masculine because I hate sports. But let's be honest, there's women out there that love sports, so that's kind of a silly thing to say, but you get you get the gist. I try to make them a little bit more simple and not as fussy, you know, and at least that's what I do when I'm making these type of cards. So I'm going to add on this last star. Now, normally I tend to go for visual triangles of 3, but I did, you know, I have 4. But that, you know, that one with the outline, I kind of don't count that one. You know what I mean? I kind of count the visual triangle as the solids. So I'm going to glue this guy down. You'll notice that the sports add-ons, you know, has this little body you can add. So you can make a taller gnome and a little sports outfit, right? It's fun with the girl gnome as well. So I'm just going to line this guy up. He's got a great hat that's made out of my favorite red. That is Pure Poppy from Papertrey Ink. I know I say it all the time, but I love that color of cardstock for red. Okay, so now I'm going to get my little sentiment placed. Just figuring out where it's going to look the best. I decide to go on the bottom there. And I'm going to use these foam squares from Scrapbook Adhesives. They're a little bit thinner than the normal ones that I use. I tend to use, you know, Stampin' Up's dimensionals the most. But these are a little bit thinner. And that way, you know, with the dimension of the gnome itself, when it overhangs on the side, it's not going to dip. So that's what I was going for. I kind of measure the thickness to make sure it's all going to lie flat. And now I'm going to add some glue to the rest of this sentiment, and it'll straddle his little legs there. Of course, he wouldn't be doing basketball barefoot, but I decided to use the running shoes on another card. So there we go. So isn't that fun? Now I'm pulling up some shape sprinkles. These are called October Sky. I use the mini and the normal ones from Doodlebug. And I'm going to I'm going to add a few stars in the same color yellow, just for fun, and it adds a little bit of shine. And like I always say, visual triangles and all that jazz. I'm trying to decide what else I'm going to add. But I'm going to pull out these little mini ones in black, and I'm going to add a few of these guys as well in a visual triangle. Just for, like I said, a little bit of shine, but not too busy, right? I'm just going to add them to the 3 yellow stars. And that is it, I think. So super cute. So thank you so much for stopping by. Be sure to hop on over to the Jada Blossom blog, be inspired by the team, the Jada Blossom store, to get your hands on these amazing products. And thanks as always for watching my videos. I really appreciate it. Make sure to come back and watch some more. Bye, everybody.